All right, so we are back and we're black. And all right, just please continue, my friend.
No, yeah, you talk about, of course, I end up talk about jiu-jitsu, right? And try to put
Mhm.
a bit more words on how that has been, at least like definitely affecting me and regarding the whole idea of respect and external factors, right, towards us. And the first thing was that's really hard in jiu-jitsu, like to by seeing someone understand how little or how, let's say, dangerous or efficient they can be, right?
Mhm.
I think the biggest example is Marcelo Garcia. You mentioned the other guy,
My team
Mickey,
also
what's his name?
mentioned. Yeah, yeah,
Mikey, yeah,
yeah.
Mikey. It's like you have like hundreds of other examples. Like you see people that you can never bet this guy is has this kind of readiness for, let's say, aggression or
Mhm.
literally someone that could be dangerous, right? And
Yeah.
that's the first thing that it came to my mind when you mentioned that about other people seeing you, right? I started to
Mhm.
disconnect a bit more I'm supposed to look and behave to more how effective that I can be, right?
Mhm.
And that for me has been a huge thing, right? Because I really start to see that, yeah, I have this path towards kindness, and I think I need to be even more kind, or kind, I don't know if that word exists, but like be a bit
Mhm.
nicer in a way, and also like avoid conflicts, right? I don't need to prove anything. It almost sounds silly because there's another way that I'm going to challenge myself, right? That I'm going to be in the mats, right? Either by competitions or training. And that doesn't matter how I look or how I behave. It's only how I perform there, right? And that's going to be the same view towards the people, right? I remember like, I think that started with kickboxing as far as I remember. I remember seeing these guys look like big, like cauliflower ears, right? And after some time training, I was like, okay, okay, I can still be stronger, but I can still have a chance. And then everyone started to look like less intimidating, right? That for me was the main thing towards martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu, right? Because the weight division started to make way less impact. But yeah, I'd just like to hear your opinion on that. How does that has been
Mhm.
affect you? How do you see that? Um, this kind of like in that sense of appearance against or versus effectiveness, like.
Mhm. Well, yeah, definitely, I agree with that. I don't feel like I need to prove myself and to, like in all kinds of situations, because that's one thing you especially see from a lot of males. A lot of time they kind of like almost have to peacock or be like, yeah, I'm a bad man, I can fuck people up, even though they don't understand shit about fighting. But it's just like, I don't even know. It's I would say, um definitely for me, I have felt more confident in like situations where things could have evolved into a physical conflict. Of course, like I want to avoid it at all costs, because it's like it just seems dumb to just fight in the streets or something like that, because yeah, you well, there's multiple reasons. Well, it's just dumb in general to fuck people up in the streets, like if there is no need for it. But like, yeah, you never know if they have a knife, if they have a gun, or you just end up pushing them on the ground and they split their head open in the concrete and whatever. It's just like,
Mhm.
it's not worth it just to be, I feel like a man. So it's like, fuck that shit.
Mhm.
um but yeah, I think that's again, kind of like more, well, nowadays they talk about like toxic masculinity and all this shit.
Mhm.
But I think that's what kind of like genuine masculinity, good masculinity is. It's like actually a person that is capable of this aggression and violence, but
Mhm.
it's kind of controlled, and the person actually wants to avoid conflicts. It's protective of people and all these things, but like not
Mhm.
actually the bully that will go up to people and want to fuck them up.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely that will give you a sense of confidence. And like you mentioned, it's kind of funny that yeah, in the movies or everybody just thinks like all these big muscular guys or all these things, they are the most intimidating ones. Well, in a way, of course, they are in that sense. Well, yeah, they're the chance of them being able to use their strength against you, of course, if you're untrained, is really, really high. So,
Mhm.
but like you can't tell from a lot of people that, yeah, they actually are like a fucking killer, basically. There's
Mhm.
the classic meme of the guy, I think it's the actor of Frodo Baggins from The Lord of the Rings, driving kind of like
Mm.
with a electric scooter with some
Mm.
fucking silly clothes on, and like, yeah, that's a
Mhm.
guy who just basically choked out like a 100 kilo guy or something like that. Like, what the fuck, man?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you never can tell, and that's to go back because now we have the time, I think,
Mhm.
because I got bought the premium shit. But to go back to the just to give an example,
Mhm.
the guy who was our supervisor in the construction stuff that I did for a while for the through the rental company. Um, he was like he didn't show me kind of like decency. Like you, well, every let's say I don't respect, or there's two kinds of respect that I'm thinking about right now.
Mm.
Respect you have just for your fellow humans, common people that like. I'm not gonna be shitty to you. I'm trying to be just kind of like nice, and you do you, and I do me, and just we all get along in a
Mhm.
peaceful manner. And then
Mhm.
there's kind of like the respect of you actually admire and respect someone. Let's say there's something
Mhm.
about them or their abilities, capabilities, or whatever, something that they do that you just feel like, fuck, that's amazing. So
Mm.
there's kind of different respects, and I think
Mm.
he didn't have either for me, like not the decency for another fellow human, like
Mm.
not at all. And that's why I kind of like felt really, really, well, I got fucking mad, I can say. And when
Mm.
I thought about this, I actually should have, right when I heard him say that, stood up and went to him, at least say like, you will show me like at least some decent respect, like almost kind of like stand up
Mm.
to myself, because I shouldn't have allowed him to do that. The
Mhm.
reason for that is because I think he was the guy, for the reason that I got fired, and they didn't even mention it to me. They just texted the rental company, and the rental company texted me, "This is your last day there. Like carry, like pack
Mhm.
up your shit and just leave,"
Mhm.
basically.
Right.
And I was like, I was so fucking mad at the guy because he continued to disrespect me and all these kinds of things. There was a lot of kind of like
Mm.
clashes almost like between us. And yeah, because it was my last day, I heard I was fired. I just basically, when I saw him, I walked up to him almost like, and then just like, is there a problem between us or something like that? And I could see him going almost like pale and like, yeah. Well, yeah, there's this and blah, 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 blah. Because yeah, I lost my motivation because he was calling me off work and all these things, trying to control my fucking life for some reason. I was like, fuck you.
Mm.
But because I was so mad, and when I was like walked up to him, I thought in my mind that if he says anything fucking wrong, I'm basically just breaking his fucking legs,
Mm.
because that kind of disrespect got me like super, super mad. Like I even thought about things that I'm gonna say, because like all the things like, yeah, you like you will, I can't remember the whole phrase, but it was something like,
Mhm.
you will show me some fucking respect, not maybe like some that I'm the greatest like worker or whatever, but you will show me some decency because you don't have any fucking idea about me or who I am and what I could basically do to you if you start this level of disrespect again, like against me. Like I will fucking break your fucking legs and watch you crawl away. And while you're crawling away in pain, I will rip down your pants and fuck you until you love me. So you better fucking respect me, motherfucker, or something like that. So it was like, but that's the thing. You never know about some people. And that's why, at least for me, I now like, well, I think kind of always, but especially after starting training, I don't kind of like treat anyone with any kind of disrespect, because you never know what kind of actual killer or whatever they are. So
Mm,
why make
mm.
unnecessary enemies? Well,
No, no,
that's a little long
no.
rant.
No. I think that's interesting. I think that's something there, right? There's a lot of anger, at least
Yeah,
there. I think
yeah,
everyone can relate to those moments that you think like, Jesus, I should have said something, right?
hmm,
Or should have behaved differently, right? Um, and first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned that story is, of course, it's always easier when you look back to say, should, as I said, like were the words I should have said, or that's the action that I should have
hmm,
taken. But this idea of the boundaries is really tricky, right? Because at least the way I feel and the way I relate to that is like, you don't want to overreact, but at the same time, you don't want to suppress anything, right? And sometimes it's a fine balance, right?
yeah,
And I think the more agreeable we are, the more we avoid this kind of conflict where it's just like, hey, I shouldn't just say anything, right? Just a bad comment or whatever it is. And then those things start like piling up. And one day, either you feel resentment or you feel guilt in a way, right? Or should you do something, go over the top and say, like, I exaggerated, and you feel somehow just kind of guilty about it. Or you suppress everything, you feel like resentment regarding that. That's the fine balance. I don't have the answer, but as you share the story, I was thinking about that. And I have honestly, I think I read that, especially for this time, that I have been asking myself to like how to define those boundaries, like how to say not only no more often, but how to say like no, that's not acceptable for me, or I don't
hmm,
like this, right? Or I'm frustrated, or whatever it is. And the tendency it seems that at the beginning you overreact, like you
hmm,
behave exactly the way you don't like. Maybe you're gonna increase the tone of your voice. You're gonna be a bit more harsh. You're gonna lose a bit of control, right? But it's a matter of balance, right? We need to explore that. It's almost this kind of gray zone. I think the same way you do with your knowledge, right? You talk more than you know sometimes. And through this kind of sparring, this intellectual sparring, like you come to learn more. And I think the same part of the emotional behavior, right? You need to push a little bit and then you step back. I think it's almost regarding this boundary between limits and readiness to violence or readiness to aggression, right? That you mentioned. I have seen that myself, like also like I wouldn't say lately, but I had a couple of situations months ago that I felt that, and I felt very strange. I was like, why I react to this kind of like provocation, right? Why I react, or a bit over the top with a comment, right? And then for this process, even talking with psychologists was like reviewing, say like, hey, because I'm still trying to find this balance, right? I think I have suppressing, I think more resentment than guilt, right? But anyway, it's just a long comment on that, on how we relate to that story, right? How we relate to this kind of moments that you look back and say, yeah, it's still is not only a memory, it's something that it gets alive when you look back. It's still this process
yeah,
of integrating those stuff, right? Because that's something like, yeah, I don't like that to repeat. How the hell I should manage these, right?
hmm,
And yeah, I can definitely see myself in that. And going back to the jiu-jitsu part, it's it should be, and goes maybe to the second point that I have been thinking is almost the first one is like you can't see, as you mentioned, like how dangerous someone is by their appearance, right? Or even by their behavior, because it doesn't correlate like to their effectiveness. The second point is I feel this almost like it's kind of indirect sort of affection. So that's a strange idea, but I haven't really think about that. Of course, you need to be mindful and kind because, yeah, if you hold, right, hold the submission for 1 second more, depend on the lock, or if you keep a choke, maybe 2 seconds more, things
hmm,
go south, right? You get someone unconscious, or someone can have like a really bad injury, right?
hmm,
But apart from that, what I start to see, and maybe even between us, right? Once you develop this kind of kindness and respect and boundaries, right? Just through the mechanics, let's put it this way, just through the mechanic of the martial art, you start to create this kind of like bonding as well, right? And
hmm,
that goes with at least in ideal scenario in my mind, like once you get to know the other one, it also gets you expand the rules, right? Oh, maybe we can go a bit harder because you know
Hmm.
each other, you know which kind of practice you can do, right? You can
Hmm.
push a bit the limits, right? And you're still fine. Maybe you're gonna wrestle a bit like a bit rougher, and that's still fine. But it's still like that goes along with this almost sort of like intimacy, right? Just hey, I know it's exactly when you go in the kind of open mat, right? You roll differently with people. Like, I know this guy better, and maybe
Hmm.
when you watch some of those buddies rolling, it feels like almost sometimes off, right? Maybe they're going to be too much, right? But they know each other, right? They know they can push a little bit harder. And what I mentioned before about this indirect affection is that there's a language that a lot of us, including myself, we don't know, right? This language of affection. That's something that I wouldn't say that's new for me, but I have been open up a lot towards that. How I show affection, right? How is not a sexualized affection? How is
Hmm.
not like a distort affection um, through maybe being just rude or rough, right? And I really start to see that and feel that in myself during jiu-jitsu. I start to connect with more people, and then the next time you go for a roll, maybe you give a hug, right, to that like buddy that you're rolling, and after training, maybe have a chat, and you start to open up, and it's like because of the mechanics, it really, at least I have seen myself, really forced me to work towards that affection, right? And it's so connect like physically that you need to have something more than just the mechanics and respect, right? Towards that journey. And especially when you spend more time with the person, right? I think it really creates this kind of, at least the way I have been framing, in lack of better words, is indirect affection, right?
Hmm.
There is a sort of affection even through fighting, right? Anyway, it's a crazy idea, but I have been thinking a lot about that and other stuff. I'd just like to hear your opinion on that, how you see that.
Well, for me, it makes sense, and yeah, it's just well, basically, just touching another person usually makes them feel good. Of course, if it's like not totally unwanted, then maybe no.
Yeah,
So,
right.
but like in general things, like I could also say just working with like people, coaching clients. So like there is touch involved, and I almost feel like every time you basically touch the client, you kind of like, well, you have to try their muscles or something, or guide them like squeeze these together or pull these back or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you kind of like can touch and do these things, I would say it creates connection, and totally, of
Mm-hmm.
course, it makes sense. Like I would say it's not like too untrue to assume that people you touch, you're more close than with the people you don't touch. So I would say
No,
that's
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So of course that happens in jiu-jitsu a lot, and yeah, I think what you mentioned is also like because that's what I feel, that even though you don't know this person, you just might be, because I have done this. I have traveled in other countries and just went for roles in whatever school is
Mm-hmm.
there. I just message the people like, hey, is it cool if I come and join train? They're always like, yeah, sure, sure. And you go there, you train, and basically always after the training, there's like few people like, yeah, do you have a lift? Do you know where to go? We can go to eat. Like, do you need a place to stay? You can stay with me at my place. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
just fucking met this guy. So like,
You're right.
it's kind of strange, but it's at the same time really cool. So yeah, there is some sort of affection, I would say, that will come from that. And what you talked about, the um, how it creates this like you can even learn boundaries from that, and kind of like
Mm-hmm.
maybe the way to behave aggressively in a good manner,
Mm-hmm.
because of course there it's basically rewarded if you do it well, like
Mm-hmm.
especially if you go to competition and you do it well. Of course it's a kind of different setting, because in normal life you don't want to break someone's like limbs, but like that
Right.
can happen in competition, of course. But it's still, of course, yeah, it's a different setting, so, and different rules
Mm-hmm.
apply for that one. So that's maybe not that, but well, in general, like, yeah, aggression is rewarded if it's done in some certain way. If you go over the top in training, of course, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it's not good. It's like no one wants that or
Mm-hmm.
likes that. So I think there is a lot of tools that you can, or tools and things you can learn from the mats, even though, like, in that sense also. So like you mentioned, if you talk to someone and you want to put boundaries, because boundaries are actually really, really important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And no one, and someone who says like we don't need any kind of boundaries, like, okay, well, let everyone in your home, let every
Mm-hmm.
person that you meet in your life just fucking touch you, have sex with you, all the things. And like, well, then there's people who don't maybe agree about the borders of countries or whatever, but like,
Mm-hmm.
borders in general, I think it just means you have some set of morals and morals, what would you say, that you are not willing to break. And I think that is actually a good thing, and you should be
Mm-hmm.
able to do it, because like, if you can't do it, you are basically so open to those kind of people who know how to do it and are actually maybe not the best kind of people, and they're just willing to use it any way possible to actually like abuse you and use you all the ways possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, 100%.
yeah, it's
100%.
definitely important that you learn it, and to be good at it, like, because like that's how you set up boundaries in conversations, like with your relationships with other people. And yeah, and I think if you can do it in a nice but like assertive manner, that will definitely help you in life, and you don't even make enemies, or like you don't make people
Mm-hmm.
upset by saying no and all these things. So yeah, it's all kind of nicely connected, I would say.
No, that's true. That's true. Why you mentioned this, I'm thinking about those boundaries and about like this, also like this level of sincerity when you share something, right? Of course, that's a lot of stuff that happens through us, right? We talk about racism and other stuff that is just somehow like it's kind of unconscious or whatever they call that. You try to be honest and sincere, but you're just not aware, right? But what I'm trying to say by this is, I think recently I took some decisions, like I think maybe more professional wise, and
Hmm.
I tried to rationalize that in many different ways, right? And one of the things, I guess, not sure it's regarding boundaries, but like, okay, how I'm going to explain that to other people, right? How are we going to, if I don't have a clear path or clear plan, when I take a decision, how I'm going to, what kind of story I'm going to tell, right? And that was the first thing that made me uncomfortable. It's like, okay, how, just if I don't have a clear path, like how I'm supposed to say that? I don't know. Just I'm going to pull the plug and have a break.
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically my biggest concern. And of course, after some time, when you just feel that's right in your heart, you're just going to take a decision, right? You're just like, yeah, that's how we're going to proceed. And the funny thing was that once some people start asking that, of course, always there's those that group that are not going to believe in you. Just like, hey, they're just trying to hide something, right? You're not giving the full story. I'm not going to try to force this conversation, but definitely this person doesn't want to share much. And there's another group that look at you and just get it straight away. You say like, hey, I'm just going to pull the plug and rethink things, step back, and I have no clear path ahead. And then that's the people or the answer that supports you. Like, again, that's the biggest fear, but at the same time, that's the feedback you get. And really makes you feel like I'm the right direction. Because either by my own imagination, I thought that people would think differently, or once you act on something, people immediately, let's say, let the guard down in a way, right? When you say like, no, no, you look them in the eyes, like have no plan, and just pulling the plug and just take a break and rethink things. And you can see their face change, right? They go for this kind of small talk, like what's next? To okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
a bold move. Yeah, I think a lot of people could benefit from that. Like, yeah, I think you're doing really good. And that's so reassuring. It was like, okay, that's my biggest concern. And now I go through not sure what are the boundaries, like how much I share to, are just gonna be raw, right? And that automatically like new boundaries. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just like we start very close,
Mm,
very concerned about like how far I go, how I define like how much I share to like, hey, I'm just gonna be somehow naked, right? And just expose. And then the people you feel that your boundaries almost expand, right? It's like go for this kind of concern and not
mm,
be really sure what you're supposed to say, how I'm gonna answer things. You're like, yeah, that's me. I'm just being open and vulnerable with you. And you see like the other person just accept that. And then you feel that shift. The other person's like, yeah, okay, now we're in a different realm here. I don't have the
mm,
next word. I don't have the next question. It just caught me by surprise. I don't know if I'm, does that make sense what I'm saying? It's just like an unexpected reaction of like
mm.
maybe definition of boundaries. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Well, I feel like, or at least what it made me think about was, how would I say? Yeah, we always have these expectations how people are gonna react to things, and usually they are way more exaggerated in our head than
Mm,
it is actually. Or depending on the person who we're talking to, like if something shitty has happened to you, let's say, and you tell about that to someone, their reaction tells more about them and not about you. It's
mm,
basically like if they would judge you for something traumatic that has happened to you, of course, well,
mm,
in some cases you might uh, actually see that the person in some ways is to blame for that. Well, but let's just say like something, well, of course I can say, but I don't want to start to talk about it too much because, yeah, well, I can
mhm,
say it quickly, but because,
mhm,
well, yeah, let's just say that you fell a victim of abuse, let's say, like I
mhm,
have in the past. So I don't
mhm,
want, if I would tell about that to someone, it doesn't, their reaction, if they make me feel like shit because of it, it's their, like it just tells me that they are a shitty person.
mhm,
But if
mhm,
they actually kind of like react nicely to it in whatever that even kind of means, I'm not even sure, but um, they react in a good way and they actually like feel for you and stuff, then it tells you also about them. So okay, maybe they're a better
mhm,
person. So in that sense, you shouldn't even be worried all that much, maybe of what people will how people will react because yeah, then you just know who are your true friends and who are not.
mhm,
So yeah, I think in that sense, and like I would say it's always good to go for the truth because like you can't lie to people all the time, or of course you can, but you never get away with it, and you can
mhm.
always be sure that
Definitely.
like especially if you start to lie about something, it's really easy to start to lie about other stuff. So that's just
Mm,
is a vicious circle that I think it's not
mhm,
good for you, and that's the reason why I think it's just better to be sincere and actually like you said, tell them what it's all about. And I can familiarize also with that in a way that like
mhm,
yeah, I quit the one job that I was like, why the fuck am I doing this basically? And I'm
mhm,
getting screwed over now, or like you could say that I was getting screwed over. I'm losing so
mhm,
much time on this. I just don't feel like doing this at all. And I feel like I'm wasting my life if I stay here. So I just thought about it and then quit without actually knowing where I'm gonna end up. But it just fucking it is. But like, if you actually feel like that, I think you should fucking do it. Of
mhm,
course, it's easy to kind of, or like, I know it's not as easy to some people than others, especially when you're younger. It's way easier to do that
mhm,
than when you're older. But like, yeah, if you're fucking miserable every day, like, why would you continue doing it? And that's a good question. And I also now remember, just to add a little bit, like you mentioned, that if you actually
Mhm.
get this trust with other people, of course it makes sense that you can push the boundaries a little bit more when you just talk of like,
Mhm.
if I talk like think about
Mhm.
who do I like joke about the most, and like who, what kind of like where, with who it's the level of jokes or like the pushing the
Mhm.
boundaries, is the more people closest to me. That's the people who I
Right.
like really try to go for the go for the jokes that it's almost too much, let's say. And we, even with us, like I would say, of course, we joke about, we call each other names and all this shit because it's just
Mhm.
for the fun of it in a way. But like you can't do that maybe with people you don't know because it seems fucking disrespectful and all these things. But
Definitely, definitely.
yeah,
Um,
and, yeah, same goes for jiu-jitsu. You can actually push the other person, but
mm.
yeah.
Right. It's an interesting analogy. I haven't thought about that, like, especially with the wars and the physical actions. Like, yeah, they're very correlated. I completely agree. And when you mentioned about, like, also very interesting, when how people react towards either our actions or our testimonials regarding things that
Hmm.
we went through or things that we're going right now in our life. And
Hmm.
a few things come to my mind regarding that sense. The first one, yeah, I completely agree, right? The same way that the reaction for the people tells more about them than by the fact itself or the history. Um, I think in a similar fashion, um, it's it's almost like a compared to cope mechanism, right? It's not, again, it's easier said than done. In theory, it's easier as well. It's not what happens to you, how we deal with that, right? Of
Hmm.
course, like, because that started making sense when you see people dealing like dramatically differently. And that's another thing that has been very, very, uh, let's say, interesting the last couple of years as well, especially the last year, I would say, when I started like getting a bit more help on that. And, and yeah, I came across like this crazy, concepts, right? Like about trauma or like complex PTSD and so on. I was like, I always heard about those things. Like, just like for people that's fucked up, right? People that went to war or people that was like heavily abused, right? And then you start to understand, like, okay, hold on. What is like that means, like complex post-traumatic stress and so on. And what's like this cope mechanism, how that works, how people react differently in same situations, right? How there's a difference between different cultures. Like people are more reactive. Just talk about myself. Like I came from, of course, Brazil, this kind of Latin blood. And we just take for granted, just like, now we're a bit more energetic, we're a bit more passionate. But it's not, it's that straightforward. Like, of course, the environment shapes us in a way.
Hmm.
And and then I really start to identify this kind of a fight or flight situation, right? There's some people divide even more like fight or flight. I think that's from and the other one I forgot. Like we're just kind of getting numb in a way. But anyway, but just fight or flight linking what you mentioned about how the people react or things that are going through is for me having really thinking like how we react to things, right? And say like, okay, if it's not what happens, it's how I cope with this, and it's not the other person, it's more like how I react. It's it really had shift like the way I'm perceive my own actions. So I will give one example. Um, I think sometimes I just feels like threatened by something, and it's not even physical. Sometimes it not even emotional. Something. Sometimes someone says something, or just a behavior, and I think like, hey, this person like is like personally trying to make me a fool. That happens like
Hmm.
a lot, a lot. And sometimes I read the environment, and it's like no one is bothered by that, but I'm taking it personal, right?
Hmm.
And I said, what the hell is going on, right? And of course, I'm not able like to unfold all the details, but it started to see pretty clear to me that I'm not reacting to that action. That I'm not
Hmm.
reacting to that moment. It's almost like kind of flashback. Something
Yeah.
triggers, and then I go to another situation, I go to another cope mechanism, and I just recreate that without really shifting the place. One example
Hmm.
that I can give to you is like one of the first things that I found that was strange after leaving the country is I think people being completely distracted in the streets, like completely oblivious what's happening around. I remember that I think the first country that I moved when I left the country was like to Australia. I was working this kind of dark block, and I remember this girl with her cell phone. This first memory that I have regarding that, not even that clear, but it was very shocking. And I was passing like through her, and I started to feel uncomfortable because like she didn't see me. It was dark, and I was afraid I want to scare her, right? And I started to make some noise, like coughing, just like down on the ground. I remember that consciously, and she didn't notice me at all. And I passed for her; she didn't even look to the side, right? The
Mm.
very dark block, and that was just blew my mind. It was like she came from a completely different reality, right? Completely different
Mhm.
environment. For her, it was like someone just walking. In my mind, it was like I'm a threat to her, right? The same thing in
Mhm.
Finland, like kids like just waiting at the bus stop by themselves. It's just like I shouldn't stand here with this kid alone, right? All this kind of very strange reactions. And that goes through all the way to daily things, right? Someone say some things, and then I was like, okay, this is person. Someone is trying to, and then I was like, okay, that makes sense. This is like way more complex, and this post-traumatic stress doesn't need to be something specific, right? Especially this complex uh, uh, environment. It's just small things that you just behave in one way, and then you think it's part of personality, right? Ah, no, I'm just short tempered. Maybe you're not. Like that's not part of your personality. You start to see this pattern of other people with the same background and see like, hey, where's this energy? And for me, that starts to be a huge gap, especially here, live in Denmark, where I'm right now in Copenhagen. I see that locals like they're way more triggered by things. This fight or
Mm.
flight mode is way more down to another. It's another baseline, and I see that every day, everywhere. It's just like people don't react that badly to things. They will come from way more stable environment. And it was like, okay, it's like, is that like everyone has a different personality or just like they have been shaped in a different way, right? And I start to see the
Mm.
energy shift when I arrive in a place and say, I can feel now they're bringing a bit more conflict unconsciously. Anyway, when I'm just going all the way ahead, I like to
Mhm.
hear your perspective as well, right? You come from a different background, but I think you read very well the situations and people, how you feel that. Because I relate to you. I also feel that you just like, you have a bit of this flight or fight mode, right? Just, hey, what's
Mhm.
going on, right? Just like to
Mhm.
understand if you how you react to that, how you see your peers or people in Finland, especially.
Well, it makes also sense that you just mentioned. I think we even talked about like just to give it a little bit more context that like back in when you grew up in Brazil, I think there was like times when you saw like bodies on the streets and all these things, like fucking people being killed, basically. Because yeah, Brazil is not the most Western driving country in that sense. Then it's maybe not that safe
Mm-hmm.
all the time in all the places. There are good places to be and all these things, but like if you go in certain neighborhoods, it's maybe not the safest option for every gringo out there. So
Not
yeah,
even for the locals, like I might say, but
yeah, yeah. So definitely we come from different kind of backgrounds. But yeah, I would agree that. Well, I think I've gotten good at it. Like, I kind of like for the first time almost in my life, I could say I'm basically over it totally, or at least mostly, because yeah, I used to be really, really kind of like suspicious of people, and always kind of be ready in all sorts of situations, and kind of like yeah, kind of like a lot in fight or flight, maybe, but
Mhm.
maybe not all the time. But like, it didn't maybe always need that much for me to kind of be alert. And
Mhm.
yeah, that will get really, really taxing, I would say. It's like actually because you
Mhm.
use way more energy to be alert than you like when you aren't alert, let's say. And
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know how I would describe it more, but yeah, I feel like well, one thing of course was like I couldn't trust people that well, I was always almost like looking the way to see that, like, yeah, you're not good. Like, even with friends and all these things, and well, maybe not the ones who have been with me usually for years or like longer time, but like I was
Mm-hmm.
always kind of like feeling like, yeah, you're just gonna leave anyway. So what the fuck you're even trying to show and prove or something, and
Mm-hmm.
just and that made me also maybe act in a way that they would actually be way more highly and likely to leave basically me because I wasn't maybe the person also at that time. So yeah, definitely
Mm-hmm.
like I would say past trauma, your experiences, especially if there is something traumatic, it will affect your life until you have kind of like figured it out in a way, meaning that you have went through the whole thing that was traumatic to you, and you kind of like maybe understand what happened, how you could have maybe done something different, and you just accept it, and because you can't actually change it because it has happened. And yeah, you can't
Mm-hmm.
affect the past, and the only thing you can affect is the future. So try to do things in the present, so maybe all the shit you went through was actually worth it. So that's kind of like my
Mm-hmm.
mindset almost about it,
Mm-hmm.
right, Neil, like at this moment.
Mm. Oh, thanks for sharing that, man. Um, yeah, because that's basically the question I have been raising like recently. As you said, like, okay, something happened in the past. I had that sort of like mechanism or cope mechanism more specifically to deal with that. Maybe I don't feel that was enough. Maybe that still affects me when I remember, right? That you just talk like it's not integrated, still like bothers me. But at the same time, how are you gonna act towards like later on in life? But basically, how I deal with that memory, how I deal with that situation, how I integrate that. And then I came across with a few kind of exercises from me, like still interesting. I'll put this way. The first one is kind of very focused, like it's a kind of like almost like self hypnosis, right?
Mm.
The way it works, it's just a very simple. Someone guide you through, but basically put you in the sort of relaxation. I think also depends how much you're. I forgot the word in English, but how easy for you to get like hypnotized again. I forgot the word
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
but
yeah.
anyway, people have different degrees, but I think I can get in this kind of good relaxation quite easily, it seems. But anyway, and the process, like someone guide you through this kind of um, hypnosis, and it's basically get you very relaxed. It's like you imagine something that really calms you down, a good memory, whatever it is. Like you just like you feel almost your body floating, right? And then through that, after like getting your body very relaxed, you go through this memory, you go through whatever happened, right? And
Mm.
almost you see that from a third person. And that's very curious because it's basically this whole idea of like disassociation, right?
Mm.
It seems that we trigger that every time something is very traumatic as well, but like in a bad sense, in a way. It's like when you endure something that's so bad. Like some people mention that after being like in a like a very bad traumatized event, that they
Mm.
feel that their bodies is not there, right? They disconnect, they disassociate,
Yeah,
and that's one cold mechanism, right? More this kind of freeze, right? That you disassociate and then you disconnect from whatever that's happening. People get kind of shock state, and um, hypnosis is almost the opposite, right? You're doing that consciously. You almost disassociate, you relax your body, and then you go for the traumatized memory, right? It's almost the opposite. And the real scenario, you had the traumatized state, and then you dissociate your body. And the other one, you do the opposite. You relax your body, dissociate, and think about the memory. Anyway, and going for this kind of exercise, there's many different stuff. Like some people talk about addiction, think about addictions, or think they're struggling, stress, whatever it is. And then you almost like try for the first time, or at least like try something very different. That's like you go for that memory, but your body doesn't react. I
mm.
think it's the same principle of people that are doing tests and studies with MDMA or ketamine, right? It just
Yeah.
disassociate, right? You put a traumatized event, but your body doesn't react. Your heartbeat's not like feeling up. You're not feeling the stress or the adrenaline in your body. And that's very unique process, right? Some people do that, I think, with the eye movement that I read about it. Anyway, and I have been experimenting with this kind of a bit of hypnosis. And I don't have a proper opinion, but it's very curious because it's very unique. You think about something stress you, for example, and you're still relaxed. And then you see through almost like two different screens, right? How you are and what the state you like to get in, and how you try to merge things, how you reframe the code mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also when I talk with psychologists like months ago, was the first thing she was trying to do. She was like, before we talk about anything, like you need to relax here, you need to trust me, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was kind of strange because it feels very artificial, right? Because like it's almost a business agreement, right? It's a kind of, and I think that's the biggest barrier. I can touch on that later. A biggest barrier, someone looking for any sort of help or support, because it's almost a different language, right? Not only emotionally, but like also like to go for this kind of help. Um, just trying to bring you some examples, like my framework before was I either talk with some friend, family, or I cope that myself, right? That's the only options that I have. And family and friends, a lot of time, because they're not like, well, let's say, versed in this kind of like approach. Most of them from a good place in their heart are going to say like, you're okay. You're still healthy or whatever. Like you have a good life. You're young, whatever they say, right? And you're just not able, you don't have the vocabulary. You're not able to go through that. And you end up in the same position you are. And dealing with yourself, again, you don't have the tools or the mechanism, you just feel trapped. It's like this vicious circle that you mentioned. But anyway, I'm just going all the way to make the point of the sort of experiments, like how to look like, okay, am I safe right now? Am I calm in an environment that I shouldn't be freaking out? From where that's coming from? And how I disassociate that, okay, I'm okay. What's the feeling I'm having? How I'm able to isolate this and deal only with the feeling or the flashback, whatever you call, and that go through hypnosis or even consciously in that. But that has been very, very interesting because you start to see or perceive the other people, right? They react as like, hey, this guy's not reacting towards this, right? Same thing you mentioned before. This reaction talks more about the person in the situation, right? This is not the situation anymore. That is a mismatch. And sometimes you're not able to say, but you just feel like, hey, what the hell's going on here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was a very long
No,
wandering
it's
explanation,
good.
but I just,
It's good, and I would like to ask before I go into it myself. How do you feel that it has helped you?
um, it's still a very new process, to be honest, but just the feeling that I can remember or deal with something that can be stressful or uncomfortable and not feeling my body rushing towards that, or that's very unique. It's very new and that's really good. But it's strange because it almost feels at the beginning you're betraying your body. Just, hey, I'm going through this stress mentally. My body should be ready, right? It's very strange because you're getting used to that. But in general, has been really good because it feels like almost a superpower sometimes. Hey, I'm not going to freak out. I'm okay. I just need you to disassociate in a way, or I don't know if that's the word, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, nice. So you're, I would, or it seems like, or sounds like you're way more in control of your emotions. You can kind of like, well, detach is maybe more the word than dissociate.
Mm,
Disassociate, because disassociate means that you kind of like go more out, but like, or like in a different kind of
yep,
way. But yeah,
you're completely right.
yeah. So you can notice the emotions, and you can kind of like detach from them and see where they're coming from, and you can kind of like go for the root cause of that and see that might not be the first thing you actually thought about or kind of fell up first, if I correct.
Yeah, you're completely right. I think
Yeah.
you got the right words on that. Yeah, detach from that. I agree. Good
Yeah,
one.
nice. And that's actually a really good thing, and I would say again, it's a really important skill to learn some emotional control and actually self-reflect. And because I think that is the key to getting yourself better in any kind of way. And
Mhm.
yeah, I could familiarize with that because like when my abuse happened, I disassociated. Then I basically just frozen, wasn't in the moment, or like almost like looking myself from an outside perspective or something like that. And yeah, and I felt, or I have felt a little bit like that. Like, again, kind of funny how jiu-jitsu will bring all these things together, but I have almost felt that in few of my first competitions. We went to the stressful situation. I almost like went to a different place because it was so stressful in a way, and it was a
Mhm.
violent situation where the other person is like aggressively coming towards you actually.
Mhm.
So well, this can be bullshit, or I don't know. Maybe I just fucking sucked, but I didn't like, felt like I didn't perform at the level that I could actually perform in competition in the first times, a lot of times, because I kind of
Mhm.
almost like fucking disassociated
Yeah.
when that happened, because the stress kind of like came to my body. And I think that happened or had happened in the past a few times in like places or things where I was all like physical conflict was, well, there's multiple kind of physical conflicts that I have been in, not that many, but like let's say one time, I think I have told you this story, but like one person just, house party, basically started to even push me from my throat a little bit. And I tried to just kind of like stay calm, even though it was going on, just a little bit, slapped the hand away, like, okay, like let's not fight and everything. And then he pushed me so that my head, or the back of my head, kind of like hit some shelf or the corner of the shelf.
Mhm.
So it basically made a small hole in there. It started to bleed like down my neck, basically. And once that happened, I was like, push me again and I will fucking kill you, said to that guy. And yeah, then people separated us and everything. I know, I remember I was then again, borders, I would say, like later on, I would say that I should have just right away basically either smack the kind of like the fan away and like make sure that, okay, if you actually want this, we are gonna fight, and like I don't think you want to do that, and or
Mhm.
something along those lines, and actually just put a boundary up and made it in an assertive manner, because I have done that, like, or that kind of things, maybe not with words, but just by giving a nice look
Mhm.
to a person, and then they basically back off because they actually
Mhm.
understand, okay, this guy, if I'm gonna push him, he will actually fucking fight me.
Mhm.
So, but then the other direction maybe, oh fuck, what was my original point? um, mm, yeah, being, oh yeah, because yeah, I've been in a conflict also where the other person again started to push me.
Mhm.
I just, when he went for the, like, was it the third or fourth push, basically just
Mhm.
snapped his head down and put him in a front headlock and just
Mhm.
gently like gave him a guillotine choke and then like let it loose. And always like,
Mhm.
are you gonna calm down? So okay, like fuck you, I'm gonna, and I was like, okay, are you gonna be calm? And just every time, tighten, loose, tighten, loose, tighten, loose.
Mhm.
So I was in total control of the situation, but that kind of happened really fast, and I just basically
Mhm.
reacted. But I have felt the both, and that was a kind of a problem for me, I think, also. And there were, the more I lived on and did like competitions and stuff and all these things, the less it happened. But it happened maybe a little bit in different kind of situations. The same thing, but I think I'm not sure what were all the things that changed it, but like one of the things, well, these are kind of things that I sometimes think about if I should say, but like, eh,
Mhm.
well, yeah, I can tell you that, well, of course, but like, I have had an experience with the MDMA, so I know what it's like. So in that
Mhm.
sense, it made me like think like the hypnosis thing you mentioned. You actually look at your trauma. Well, then it's basically, or wasn't maybe that voluntary. It's may way sounds like it's way more voluntary, like if you do it through meditation. But
Mhm.
basically, you still are in a nice place because all of your feel good
Mhm.
chemicals and all these things are going.
Mhm.
Like serotonin is high and is getting released.
Mhm.
Oxytocin is getting released, which is the thing you get from touch, and actually babies get in their mother's wombs and all these things. So yeah, you just are in this feel good place, and you can look at all the fucked up shit in your life without having an emotional reaction to it. So you're not
Mhm.
freaking out to it. So that made it easy to go through that, or way easier to actually go through that and look at my life in a way. Okay, these have affected me in these kind of ways. So yeah, definitely makes sense that like learning to do that on your own, and learning some emotional control, and that will make sense. And I can say about the last competition, like you said, you're almost, or like, you see the your body's reaction to it, like, because I even told you, like, I before leaving I took like fucking three explosive shits in the house, and was like, oh my god, my body was reacting really badly in a way to it, because it
Right.
knows, yeah, we're gonna go and do a fucking fight and all these things.
Mhm.
But right away, once I got into the like competition arena, and I started to move around, started to like warm up, I fell in way more to the kind of like the zone, let's say, and I was ready to go. I was like,
Mhm.
"Fucking hey, we're doing it!" Because I also saw that that was the guy, or like, ooh, like, yeah, thinking about, like, because I know and I feel like I'm fucking stressed. But do you want to be the
Mhm.
type of man that will uh change the way they view life or do life because they feel stressed, or all these things? Like,
Mhm.
no, fuck no. And like I meant, like you mentioned earlier, I think it's about like me actually fighting against me way more also than it's also, of course, when I'm gonna fight another person. But it's about like
Mhm.
you just fighting you mentally most of the time, so you can actually be ready and perform in any kind of pressure
Mhm.
situation. And yeah, I think I can also do those things way better now. And I had one other point I was trying to also make, but I'm talking so much that my points are getting confused almost. But yeah, it's
No, it's very interesting.
yeah,
What we're
yeah,
bringing,
it's
but
good
it's
that I learned these things, and I'd say it's really beneficial. And I can definitely say it has made my life better, and I understand a lot of things way better also now.
no, it's I really like this kind of conversation. Honestly, of course, had me talk about that for like almost all the times we meet, but it's always good to go back to that. That was something new. I think there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I'm thinking here. First one is also a topic that also very close to my heart. Is just like how this other, like whatever substances they are that change your perception of reality, right? And when you talk about like basically sort of like what we can call like kind of recreational drugs, right? MDMA or maybe I don't know LSD or um, some people that even take ketamine, right? As well.
Hmm.
I never tried that,
Yeah.
but but going back to dissociating is kind of like this well-being or this feeling of feeling everything is great. Really made me think like after this experience more how to deal with situations and I'm not sure if it can call traumas, but like challenges in your life and how using those things, especially more as again the recreation environment, how does it affect us? And exactly as you said, it just disconnect your body from that your worries, right? And and that's how can be that are tricky, right? I'm not sure how addicted it can be because I think there are other ones. It seems like more addicted. I don't have experience either, like cocaine, heroin. People say that can be
Mhm.
really go down the rabbit hole. But these associators, I don't know how the word in English is, like these associatives, right? Whatever they
Mhm.
call, they're very powerful from that, right? You take that and then suddenly you don't feel any worries, right? You just feel this kind of well-being, right? And then
Mhm.
whatever you listen to music, whatever environment you are, you just feel like, okay, I feel this fullness, I feel this oneness, right? Because they really disconnect you, right? I think with LSD on the kind of drugs is like psychedelics also works really strong on that side because it even goes like to the boundaries of your body, right? It's kind of dissolution, right? But anyway, I think my point here is more um, on the lines that you mentioned is like even being without being conscious about that. That's so it's another code mechanism, right? But
Mhm.
again, the set and setting is not there, right? You just maybe a lot of music, a lot of, and I think that is a place for everything. It could be like recreational mode. It can help, but it feels to me is like it's a workaround, right? We use that, and I think we need the X as well. Like I'm not talking about the drug, but I think the feeling, right? We need like these moments of celebration, these moments of. I think that maybe the question is like how often they are. It's like a carnival, right? Having carnival once a year is fine, but every weekend is the carnival. It's just like you lose the purpose, right? You lose like the balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
But going back to the first point is like this workaround looking back and some sort of like experience that I had, I was like, okay, that now connects the dots a little bit better, right? It's not because I don't know you feel high and then enjoy the music better, just feel like better for yourself. It's just like that's a cope mechanism. And how many people are not doing that, right? They're
Mhm.
using that. It was like again, you're not conscious that you have it. You're not conscious that your body is overreacting. You're not conscious that having this flight or fight mode, right? But suddenly you take something, suddenly go to a place, and then you feel this kind of like almost integration, feel like it's kind of like calmness in your body and you just love it, but you don't know how to achieve that in other ways, right? You don't know what's behind that. Like you don't know anything. You just want
Mhm.
for sort of escape, and sometimes escape becomes like a kind of routine, right? And
Mhm.
that's I think the main point. What you mentioned, recreational drugs and so on. This is very tricky. Like, I think like people don't discuss that further. Even like the scientific studies right now, we still I think like in a sort of renaissance. People are trying to get back to that and try to understand better how that affects us. That's like definitely interesting. But yeah, I forgot what was the second point. I think this one was very interesting. Just like to put some words on that.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
yeah, if you remember, continue, but I made remembered my earlier point, like how could I also feel sometimes that I shut down or had shut down. And I think from what I've understood and read about psychology, it's like people with PTSD, you kind of need to understand evil before you can get over it. And I learned this and I started to work on myself a lot. And one of the first things that I started to do, especially a lot, was started to look and read about things like concentration camps and serial killers and all these kinds of things. Because yeah,
that
what's
sounds
more,
horrible.
yeah, what's fucking more darker and evil than that, basically. So,
Mm,
but the strange thing was, at first, I my body kind of like didn't couldn't do it. What I mean by that is I was consciously going towards it, like, I'm gonna watch this fucking documentary. Now it tells about like people were put in concentration camps and fucking slaughtered there, and they have video
mhm.
footage of that, like mass graves and people shooting fucking other people in the head and then falling into the graves and all these kinds of things. So pretty fucking dark stuff. But what I noticed that I was basically without me kind of like being that conscious or feeling like or how would I describe it, but what happened was I basically fell asleep. I think what my brain was kind of like
Mm,
doing that was kind of like shut down. We don't want to face this because
mm,
the bad things were somewhere hiding in the
Hmm.
head, like in the deepest of layers. And when I'm going again, like towards something like that, my body and like brain was almost like, let's shut this down. And because that happened a
Hmm.
few times, I started to watch it and it was like maybe 5 minutes and I was like, and then I was like, what
Okay,
the
that's
fuck?
very bizarre, right?
Yeah. And
Okay.
that happened, like I put it on again. I was like, I don't feel even that tired. And that like that happened for a while until I kind of like got used to it. Then I could do it even more and more and more,
Mm,
and then understand it even more. Like maybe there's are in a way like different levels of evil or bad things, but there are things that we all agree that are universally bad. Let's say like kill another person, like fuck someone's wife or whatever. Like, but like all these kinds of things that are
mm,
not maybe that good, steal stuff, betray people, lie. Like, but like I think they
mm,
all can fall under this some sort of umbrella called evil things or bad things, and
mhm,
there are like real extreme examples of that. What it can be when it's like even like almost let's say recreationally smart and sometimes even though it's fucked up to say funny, and that's what the fucking Joker I think it
mhm,
represents. Its
mhm.
nickname also is the Clown Prince of Chaos. It's like sometimes
Mhm.
the fucked up things in your life they are kind of like darkly satiric, like, and you're like, I don't know if I should laugh or fucking cry.
Yeah.
It's so
Right.
horrible, but what the fuck, man? So
Right.
yeah, so that was one of the
I'm
things that I noticed how it has affected me. But yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about this kind of exposure, like to horror in a way or tragedy. How does that? How do you think that helps you? Because for me, it would be more like kind of a process. I just have more flashbacks. You just get this kind of bad energy around, and
Mm.
I felt it was very interesting. This kind of like you just fall asleep, and then later on, I don't know. I'm just curious to listen more. Like, how do you think that helped you, or what kind of thing that impact had on you? Because I watched like some documentaries about like Holocaust, so it's just not something that I'm probably not gonna getting back to that. For me, it was like so bad that I was like, okay, I cannot handle this. Right? It's just like too
Yeah.
much. How does that, do you think, work for you, or what kind of positive impact do you think could get from that?
Well, I would describe it that like because you need to understand what happened to you. So
Mm,
how bad is it? It can, even though it might sound like a bad question, but I think it is in a way like a valid question because like, well, the worst thing that has happened to you is the worst thing that has happened to you. So with other people, it's just something like, well, I didn't get the newest Pokemon, so bleh. But like, because yeah, you might need to determine in a way, of course, that okay, how bad was this shit that happened to you? So,
mm,
once you start to maybe get an understanding of that, there are okay, it was bad, of course, or like fucking horrible in a way, but like this was maybe even more horrible, let's say. But like it's bad that
mm,
you have to compare, and I think it's like not a good idea always to compare things to
mm,
other things, but like just to understand what happened to you, you might need to kind of understand what kind of level of shit this was. And I would
mm,
say that, yeah, again, abuse or like rape, sexual abuse is falls under the shit that you never should do to another person.
mhm,
So, um, yeah, I would say that it falls under that. But then again, and the reason I don't usually talk about it that much is like I don't want anyone to treat me like a fucking victim. I refuse to be called a victim, even though I was kind of was a
mhm,
victim of something.
mhm,
But
mhm,
like I don't want anyone to treat me any differently because of that. Because it's like yeah, fuck that. It like
mhm,
and that's why I think like the more you understand there are these kinds of things, you can kind of start to understand that or maybe it gives you almost like a moral code, like what is good, what is bad, even
mhm,
though
Mm,
or at least starts to
mm,
guide you more into like a path of like, okay, these are good things, these are
mm.
bad things, and
Right,
yeah.
right. No, thank you for sharing that. Um, while you're saying that, I'm just trying to gather some feelings here and tell you like how that resonates or how that land here. The first thing is, yeah, I think I understand in a way when you mentioned like watching some kind of other challenge or people going through very hard moments. You can give like a different framework how you see yourself, like just to position yourself like okay, through my life journey, what kind of things happening, what happened, and how that relate to other human beings, right? Yeah, I think that definitely going to change through as everything in life, like from people to different people, right? Yeah, as I said, for me, it would be like, no, I just want to keep maybe my framework kind of small, and there's some stuff that can be so disturbing that I rather just avoid. But at the same time, I I fully agree with the idea to compare those things in a positive aspect, right? Just say more like, hey, try to see different perspectives. I don't think it's enough, but helpful, right? Hey, what I'm right now, what kind of sample I'm comparing to, right? Because a lot of times it's just comparing, as you just said,
Mhm.
even like for the good and for the bad. You try to put yourself like relate to other people, like how bad I'm feeling, how good I'm feeling, whatever, how far I am, whatever I'm doing. It's just a bunch of comparisons. Like there's no absolute number, right? It's all about like other reference points. And I think that makes sense. The second point, second feeling when you mentioned about like when we open up about stuff, right? That's another journey I think has been very interesting and definitely have been the ones that I think like people close to me have been most impressive about like open up and be able to put that in words and share that. And because I think it goes back to that idea that once you start sharing something, especially people what people wouldn't expect or they're not used to do, I think my first reaction or the way I was react in the past was whenever I struggle with something, if I have to share, I either shut down or just trying to give like this kind of sugar coat version. Like whatever it
Mhm.
is, could be like the silliest thing happen one day, to something that can be traumatic or very challenging. But always this way, I'm gonna make a comment and then maybe I'm gonna crack a joke or maybe just diminish that or just make that like a bit more superficial, right?
Mhm.
And for me that was a sign of strength, right? It's kind of like okay, this person is able to suppress, control, and it doesn't feel moved by that. Because of
Mhm.
course, after a while, it feels off. It's just like people went through this topic and it didn't feel natural, didn't feel that was integrated, right? And
Mhm.
of course, that's the other part that the person just completely collapsed, cannot even talk, can even think about it, or even like don't even remember, right? That goes back to the associated part that people just, I don't have any memories, right? But when you get something in between, I think has been very interesting. This kind of you talk, I think it's a symbolic way is more or less what I have been seeing. And again, this goes with seeing other person sharing those things, right? What I mean by that, like there's a lot of things that only change, or at least like it's leveraged by when you see another person act in a different way. What I mean by that, like if you go through a challenge event and you see another person talk about that, right? And that's the first reaction you have, first shift, at least from my perspective. Like for me, was people like being very vulnerable, very open, right? Including
Yeah.
this testimony itself. I was like, oh shit! Like some people are open, can do that. That's the first reaction. Like it shifts a little bit because you see the impact of people doing that. The second is how that made, right? And again, you go through at least from my reference point, like to suppress and just like either you hide your emotions to, hey, there's another person, especially talk about men, right? There's another guy that is able to talk about it. He can even cry or that still affects him, but he cry and looking in the eye. I think when I started looking people doing that, and something very recent, honest, right? Because for me, like this sort of emotion has been very restricted, like to um like relatives, like people very, very close to me. Like I almost could count in like fingers in one hand, and it was like okay, that's the place I could like have that, not even conscious, but that's a place I could like let's say, cry, right? And I see seeing other people like going through those emotions, like crying, looking in the eyes. I was like, that's a complete different strength, right? That I
Mm-hmm.
never was able to touch. This person get emotional. They show the vulnerability. They open up, but it's still like engaged directly, right? You still have that kind of gaze. And that for me was a huge shift. I was like, oh my God, like how a person can do that. And that felt like way more strength than any other method. Like if you suppress, you don't, whatever you say, like, and for me, like, it still has been mind blowing to see those things. And I start to, I wouldn't say practice. I don't think it's something you practice, but it's something when you see, it's like, okay, I can do that. I think it's very powerful. This idea of like, it's not theoretical. You don't need to read in a book or someone tells you that. You need to see that through your eyes, through experience. And that's
Mm-hmm.
like how you start to affect other people, right? And it's almost like this kind of religious testimonials, right? You can read like a sacred book, you can go through whatever, right? When you see like a testimony of someone and you feel that real with all the struggles, that touches you. It's like, oh my God, that's something real there. But anyway, I'm saying all of this, as I like to say, to go to the point, back to your story, is like, it's all about the reference point. It's all about
Mm-hmm.
like these examples, like when you, how you see other people manage that. And that through those reference and examples is like, oh, okay, I can do the same. I can behave the same way. That's another way uh, to show the strength that from me before or inside my head or my heart was like being completely vulnerable and devastated. And I think that's the work I have been very interested in, right? Not only towards myself, but the people around. Just like, hey, in a few words, is like most of my life has been like I need to see the other one bleeding before I bleed, right? Or what I need to bleed to see the other person bleed. I was like, hey, I'm gonna open up, right? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
gonna expect to ask anything from you. If you feel so, you do it. But I that's my journey, right? That's my journey. And I'm here just to share that with you. I'm not trying to teach anything, to show any example, but just say that's my journey. And I think when I started seeing other people doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to do the same. Like, I don't need to keep holding all this shit, right? I don't know if I went all the ways, but
No, no, yeah, it
yeah.
makes totally sense that I would agree that yeah, and it sounds familiar also, like coating things are kind of like saying nah, nah, it's like you couldn't kind of like tell or kind of almost like crack about it, like hey, ho, ha, ho. But I would say it's way more powerful and it has more strength to actually be totally open about your life and your faults, your mistakes, all these things, and still kind of like come to the other end and be like, yeah, well, yeah, it is like this and whatever, and then kind of like still be totally intact, or well, not totally intact maybe, but like yeah, you can fucking handle it. And I think that's the well, maybe that would be actually a good reason to like you said yourself, you saw that and you made it realize to you realized after that that it was possible to do this. So kind of maybe the more examples there are about people of actually going through some really hard shit and still being able to continue their life and actually do a lot of stuff, achieve something so great that even like no one even could thought that it was possible. So I think that's actually what's missing a lot, maybe in modern day, or it's sometimes you can see, but it doesn't feel authentic with some like influencers and all these things for some reason. I don't know. They don't
Mm.
feel that sincere, and I think we can kind of like feel who the people who are sincere and who are not, and that's so weird that you can kind of sense that. But anyway, um, yeah, it's a different strength to keep your head held up high no matter what you go through. And there's a lot of people, well, maybe this can trigger someone, but there's a lot of fucking soft people at the moment. It's like you have everybody else has to custom their manners, their words and everything to this one person so that they wouldn't feel bad or like like world is not like that, and I think you need to have this sort of strength, and it's the thing that actually keeps for lack of better word, maybe order in the world, because like you can actually go through a lot and you can still, well, that's the strength, kind of strength you actually, I would think you need going through something, through like a totalitarian system or so. Like what is the kind of strength you actually get to resisting that? Because yeah, there's a saying kind of like weak men make hard times and hard men make like easy
Mm-hmm.
times and all these things. And easy times make weak men, and the circle continues, and etc. etc. So yeah, that is definitely a real strength that you should or try to find in your life. And then, of course, it's not about educating other people, like you said, but maybe in a sense you could even use the word educate. If they just don't know, then they can get an example of, like, I'm not sure if you would call that education, but at least they have like a person went from point A to point B, and he
Mm-hmm.
managed to do it with even all these hardship and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add one thing to try to kind of also tie it together, like I know there's or I have heard some people say that there's nothing good in this world, or like there are no good things, there are no good people, or all something about like along these lines. And what I also think that because to be for there to be something, there kind of needs to be the opposite. So if you can see that evil is real, and I think evil being real shouldn't be too hard to realize, at least in some level. Like violence is real, pain is real, so bad things are real, so that means there needs to be good things. To just even say that there are such things as bad things, you have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of agree that there are good things. So if you can agree that there's something evil or bad, that means there's good people and like actually generally good things. And that will help you and everyone around you, maybe um, guide us towards good behavior, because you can differentiate between the two and not maybe blur the lines as much, because well they're always a little bit blurry, but like that's why we need discussion and all these things to actually find out where is the line that we all
Mm-hmm.
agree that it's good for all of us.
Mm. You mentioned two things that I'd like to hear more. First one was like, it seems that we have like this kind of sense that something is
Mm,
sincere or not, like someone has been um, honest or whatever you call, right? That's a very curious thing, as I said. Like sometimes we can't say. It's that
mhm.
gut feeling, right? You talk with someone, you go through some situation, and it's like something is off, right? Or the opposite,
Yeah,
like, yeah, I really, really bought into that. I'm not sure. Like, sounds a bit crazy, but like, yeah, I'm in, right? The sort of way. And and the second thing is more, you mentioned like, oh, maybe it's a way to educate people for this kind of like emotional challenge and so on. For me, it really feels like it's kind of different reference points, right? You show different
mhm,
reference points. It's just something that we didn't know that not only exists, but also like it could be framed that way. It could be dealt that way. And I
mhm.
really see this way, at least the way it feels to me. Like had been dealing with people, seeing things, and going through myself. It was, oh, that's a different reference point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the way I would put those together, like to hear opinions, the following, like when you start sharing it, some people, whatever you're going through, or just any sort of like challenge, as we have been talking, there is this kind of sense when you change the reference point and when you're very sincere, that almost like you feel a bit more human, right? What I'm
Mm,
trying to say is like you talk with someone and then it feels that that person explained a little bit more what is supposed to be human, right? You cut the
mm,
small talk, you cut like this kind of like the jargons, you cut like the whatever it is, right? And the people goes a bit more raw. And when you experience that, it was like, okay, it's almost, it feels, at least from my experience, that the person explained a bit more what to be human, right? Maybe
mm,
people write really well. It could be like even like a poem, right? But I'm just talking
mhm.
about talk to people kind of face to face style. People go and say or act in a way and you feel like, oh, and that's touched you, right? It doesn't need to be something big, but just maybe small kinds of kindness, or even like showing vulnerability, right? It just, for me, it feels expand what's to be human, right? You feel that
Yeah.
sincere. It changes the reference point. I just like to hear your opinion on that, or any situation that you have felt this way. Because for me, it has been happening
Mm,
like quite often, and I started to feel this kind of push. I was like, I should expose myself. People have been doing so well that towards me, and
mm,
and that's my journey. Not because I'm an example for anything. Like just my journey. I need to expose myself. I need to be more honest, more sincere, and that goes back to all we have been talking. Right? It's like, what should I do professionally? What should I do in my life? What's the
mm,
purpose? Or what? How should I like have people around me? Right? How, what kind of conversation should I have? But anyway, just like to
mhm.
hear from you what your experience has been with that, when, or examples of that, if you have.
Yeah, well, reference for the first thing, the reference point is way better word for it than education. I agree. That's like it's way kind of like fits way better. But yeah, for the first thing, the sincerity, like I don't know what it is, but like I have had a lot of like a gut feelings about a lot of things in my life, and I've usually kind of like followed that or gut feeling or intuition or whatever it is. But for some reason, it has kind of served me well, I would say. And no matter what it is and what how it is, how it happens, I'm not sure. But I would say that there are, maybe it's evolutionary or something, because like yeah, you need to be able to the separate the liars from the people you can trust and all these things. And of course, I would say also that the more younger you are, the more naive you are to that. And the way
Mm.
you more you experience, the more you kind of like can see all these things, the more you start to recognize the patterns of like this shit is just off, something is like whatever it is. And I think yeah, that what it is maybe, or that's what it is. I think it's like some sort of pattern recognition, that you just see it enough times and you just start to see that okay, this box is ticked, this box is ticked, and this box is ticked, and it's like, well, that's too many boxes, man. Something's off. So
Okay.
yeah, maybe it's something like that. And the reactions from other people sharing and all these things are what made what was the first thing that came to mind, that yeah, it is in a way like a almost like a leap of faith, let's say. I
Okay.
trust my, or I'm vulnerable in front of you, and you can do whatever you want
Hmm.
with it, basically. And again, maybe the other person's reaction tells you way more about that. But sometimes, of course, that can happen from people you don't even expect, and sometimes it can feel weird. Even though I myself, I'm not maybe for the one for the all the small talk all the time. I'm way more interested to hear things that are actually genuine and like special to you. Let's say, like, what is something that you can tell me
Hmm.
that no one else could tell me? That is like super interesting, I would say. But then sometimes, yeah, you can get it from people you're maybe not so close with, and you kind of feel a little bit strange or off. Like, okay, I
Hmm.
didn't know we were such good friends, but okay, sure, let's talk about that. Or I think that's the reaction I have
Hmm.
had sometimes. But most of the time, it's again, I think you are trusting the other person, and like you said, like the boundaries expanding. That is like what you do. You take a leap of faith and you just expand into something. And I think that's with a lot of other stuff
Hmm.
also. You kind of need to see some sort of possibility for something bigger or better, and then you can actually take the leap towards it. But um, yeah, it's an invitation to be open and honest. I think that's all. That's also what it is. Like what someone does when they actually open up themselves to you. And I can say that, well, from our past experiences, you have definitely been one person that I have done that a lot and almost like practiced it a lot.
Mm.
And it makes me also think about, like, especially there's a lot of moments that we have shared that was like kind of special, I would say, sacred
Mhm.
conversations like we have mentioned before.
Yeah.
But especially made me think about, was it the first time I was in Copenhagen and we went to the War Pigs and just talked about a lot of stuff. Yeah, it was the night after the rave in the park and all these things.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just remember there was this moment, and I kind of feel similar at the moment. But then it was, I think, one of the first times, like one conversation actually made me feel like I was totally present, and I felt kind of naked, and I was like, the moment just felt special in a lot of ways, almost like the times to stood, well, not stood still, but like moved kind of slow, but at maybe fast at the same time. You just lost almost the
Mhm.
sense of the time, and you just were, and you just, I think even you said something along those lines, like, this just feels right. It feels special. And it was like, this is something that we definitely should do more, or something along these lines. But yeah,
Right.
that's one of the good examples of like what I have felt like and experienced with, like, actually being super, super open with someone, and actually creating this new sort of trust, and I feeling
Mhm.
way, way deeper connection to the person after that.
Mhm.
And it didn't have anything to do with any sex or anything, or it wasn't
Right.
sexual.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful and to hear. Beautiful. Like it's uh yeah, that's just amazing. The first thing that came to my mind, I think when you left, you sent me a message, and I was like very raw, very open, right?
Mm,
About like how the days had been and so on, and
mm,
how this conversation had affected you. And definitely, of course, like when you reach that point, as you mentioned, like this sacred moment, like it's just it's undeniable, right? And I think it's
mm,
more and more looking at my life, just like how I put my energy on those things. That's the most like it's the closest thing I get like to be alive in a way, right?
mm,
Um, I really, really like what you said. Like it's an invitation to be open, honest. I even wrote it down here when you're saying
mm,
that because yeah, I'm still thinking about it. It really hit home that one, to be honest. Um, because as we talk, like, one thing is about, of course, the sacred moments, as you said, what that's running. Other thing is that change the reference point, whatever shape or form it is. But this invitation should be open, honestly. I think it's yeah, it's. I'll tell like a crazy story. I think it's a good. I wouldn't say
mm,
segue, but it really takes me to that place. For the I don't know, maybe the last few months, I had this crazy idea that's the following, right? Exactly as we talk right now, right? I had this
mm,
conversation between us. We, of course, we're recording, and hopefully you have that with more people, right? And you
mhm,
talk about like mental health, right? Mental health is kind of like a nice
mhm,
shape form word that I think even as using your vocabulary, it is attached from what you feel real, right? I would say like
yeah,
being raw. I'll try to use other words that are close to my heart in a way, right?
mhm,
Being raw and feel like real or like feeling other person as a human being. And the idea is the following, right? Uh, from my own journey, I have been feeling like a lack of those places, right?
mm,
Is either when you find someone, like we have this conversation, we can live in like different countries and of course have different lives. And we need to put a lot of effort just to have this space. And that only comes because that's how many years we know each other, like how many times we
mhm,
spent together, how many times we have been talked, right? It's like it's a lot of like uh, uh baggage, I would say in a good sense, like a lot of background just to reach this
mhm,
point, right? But I think once you have that, once you feel safe, right? The same way, once you share about your journey, you're able to do that more often with more people, right? It doesn't
mm,
feel alien, doesn't feel bad because you're just more, we're safe in that environment. And my idea is the following: is just creating this kind of environments. And what I mean by that is like I can just like have a room, like I wouldn't say meeting room, but like a yeah, a space where people can sit down and just say, hey, my intention here is the following, right? I have been going through this journey. Goes back to people just feel you're sincere or not, right? I'm not here to sell anything. I have been doing that for my professional life for many years. Like, trust me, I'm a seller. I'm not trying to sell anything. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is like, my journey has been this one to open up, be more vulnerable, rethink like the way I react to things and how I show affection, right? For example, you mentioned about the sacred moment, and we always feel a bit off, right? It's like, oh my God, is the other guy gonna see me as any kind of like sexualized side? The other person gonna see me like as a weak, right? And it's almost like you don't know where to position yourself, right? I have felt that myself. But anyway, and sharing this kind of journey, I say like, hey, the more I open up, the more I see other people with different reference points, sharing their stories, being emotional, the more human I feel, the more kind of drive I feel, right?
Mm.
And I think it was a year ago, more or less, I did this kind of, I wouldn't say experiment, but this idea, just random posts on the internet, like invite people to have a coffee, right? I don't know if I mentioned the story to you.
Sure.
To have I just posted on Facebook like a year ago or more. This kind of similar journey. I was just curious, like, if be completely open to meet people, and like, I don't care who are these people, right? I'm not trying to promise any friendship. There's no dating, nothing. Just like complete random people. I posted a kind of community on Facebook with like international expats. And I say, yeah, for the next, I don't know, I think it was 5 weeks, every Sunday morning, I'll have a coffee with complete strange. And I have this calendar link online, and you can book. And if you want to know who I am, you can just drop me a message on Facebook, whatever. You can choose the place as well, whatever. Just sit and have a coffee, then have a chat. And what's kind of bizarre, because I felt like, oh, am I looking crazy or too open, whatever, right? But something inside me just like, go for it. And once I wrote this master to this group, I think it was like in 1 hour, everyone started to give really good feedback. We were very positive, like 100% positive. And I think in 2 hours, like I had like, I don't know, 5 people book it, right? For the next 2 months. And after I think the next 1 or 2 hours, I don't know, 5 people sent a message. Hey, is everything's booked? Can we sit down to have a coffee? Anyway, long story short, I think I sat with like probably 8 or 9 people, right? Complete strangers. And I have like a long talk, and it was an amazing experience, right? Most of them I never met again, but it was amazing, honestly. One of the most interesting things that I did in my life. And again, it was overwhelmingly positive. Everyone sharing their life, whatever they're doing, how long they had been here, because it was basically all international, right? But one thing that was very curious was like, I think from this 8, 9 people, only one guy. Everyone else was a woman, right? And I felt it was very curious, right? And again, like there was no dating, nothing, right? We're just like sitting with complete strangers, right? And again, people can feel you're sincere or not through your writing, from when you sit down. The first 5 minutes, people are a bit like, who is the other person? And then when you open up, like 100% other people just open up as well. You just feel like, hey, this person is really being honest, right? And I was very, very honest about what had been happening in my life up to that time. And what I'm trying to say, going back to this, my new crazy idea is like, we can use all the data that we have available, but in the day, I just feel that, because has been my journey, like a lot of men, they don't have the space for that. They don't know where to find those references. They don't have these new reference points. They know where to start. The whole idea of like looking for help for mental health seems like so alien, because I relate to that. I was like, what the hell is it? Like, it looks like talk with psychologists. I don't even know where to start this, right? Should they call a doctor? I don't want to talk to a doctor that I feel a bit bad. It's just a bad moment. I'm going to like work this up, right? I just need to man up. I just need to, I don't know, hit the gym more often. I just need to fight, whatever it is, right? And once I start to see, as I said, other people react different ways, and that I start that process myself, I was like, I should like just make this space, right? And that goes back what you mentioned, like, this is just an invitation, like, if because this word never came across that way. I knew that was like to build this kind of sacred moment, but that's the word. Like, I like to have this invitation to be open and honest, right? And whatever it is, to your feelings and everything. And I have been thinking a lot how to do that. I think basically I'm just like building that up, because I don't think it takes much. You just need a space, write online, whatever it is, and be out there, right? Because when you expose yourself, that's the thing I learned with this kind of like meeting with strangers at coffee. Once you do it, you do all the setup and you open up, people just come, right? It's like they're gonna
Mm,
emerge from like nowhere in a way.
mm, mm,
Anyway, just that's the crazy idea, and I don't know exactly where that would be, right, or where they're gonna be heading to. Is more kind of co-creation, but my point was it really hit home when you say like the saving nation to be open and honest, right, and just just man here and just like, hey, I don't think I have been doing a good work to deal with that. I think
mm.
has been very isolated, and a lot of people, oh, like many times I have seen people struggling, and it's like for a long time. Talk about 10 years or more. Sometimes they never really be able to open up whatever
Mhm.
they been carrying inside themselves. But anyway, that's the crazy idea that I have.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense. And that was actually really interesting. I don't think you have told that, but it's like, yeah, in a way, it's a crazy idea, but at the same time, I think it was pretty goddamn brilliant also. So it's a really interesting thing. And yeah, that made me think a lot of things. Like one thing also, like you mentioned at the end, that like just creating that space and people will usually come. Like basically a lot of times like with this podcast with the photo shoots and all these things by
Mm,
just actually asking someone and just like talking and just yeah being sincere. I have this idea in mind, what do you think about it? Should we do it? And a lot of people, like I would say 9 out of 10 basically say yes. There's maybe the one that says like nah, well I don't know, blah, blah. But
mm,
it's it's a crazy thing, and I totally agree that there's it just creates this nice if it's like between men brothership, and that's one of the things that I think it's missing a lot nowadays, or there has been people saying that it seems to be more and more common, and even some guy did it in some conference or something like this kind of like someone gave a talk and then they were like how many people in the audience has at least one person they kind of like talk what they're going through and all these things, what they're feeling and all like this sort of stuff, like at least once a week or something. And then a
mm,
lot of females, like it was at least almost all of
mm,
females raised their hand, and maybe like only few guys raised their hand, and even well, no, it was first like at least once a month. All the ladies raised their hands, few guys raised their hand,
mm,
and then once a week, still like maybe 60 to 80% maybe of the ladies raised their hand, but the rate like amount of men dropped to basically zero or just one. So
mm,
as men especially, we seem to like I could again familiarize like mental health and all this. Like, who do I need help from? Like, just what the fuck? What is this is shit? Like, in a way, there is this kind of stupid thing that we want to think about that we don't need anyone else and all these things, but
mm,
we need fucking people. We go insane if we don't have anyone to talk to, and that's like one of the reasons why people who are too long in like isolation, they will start to talk with themselves. So it's like, yeah, yeah, we definitely need people to talk to and bounce off ideas and all this, and just to basically make ourselves sane. Because, like I said, we tend to make things way worse in our heads, and if we never talk any of it out, it will make us fucking crazy. So, yeah, definitely, it's a thing that it's you and like you said, I have also seen a lot of people who seem to struggle, and I'm not sure if it's the shame or whatever it is, and they just can't seem to open up to people about it, and they just
mm,
are almost dooming or judging themselves about all these things, and thinking that people will abandon them, think about them like in less kind of ways and all these things, and it can be basically anything. Especially, I have seen a lot of people who have well, used drugs a lot, or
Mhm.
at least one point of their life used it a lot, and they carry this weight with them like it's like a fucking
Mhm.
heavy blanket or a
Mhm.
backpack that they're carrying around, and it's seems kind of odd, and they just can't seem to have the courage to actually drop the bag. But I don't know. It's super weird, and we definitely would need to. And yeah, like what I have noticed, like myself and my experience with all these things, like the more I have been able to be open and sincere, the more the people
Mhm.
actually start to open up, and then we can create this something good out of it. Let's say, to just lack
Mhm.
of better words at the moment. And yeah, I think that's kind of like one of my superpowers almost, that
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of people who have been nervous to talk, like on podcast, nervous to be in front of a camera, I have been able to make them
Mhm.
relax and be calm quite fast by just being
Mhm.
open and sincere and honest. And then it feels like we bond actually quite quickly in like maybe at least semi deep level. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. And I had what was the one thing I also was about to say? Yeah, well, yeah, just also to finish it off in a way that
Mhm.
like you said, or I think we both kind of said, like after we, or like me especially, having the experience
Mhm.
that we had in the War Pigs, which is a great place, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, uh,
Mhm.
and then just like thinking about like this is the kinds of relationship that I wish to have. If
Mhm.
like fuck all that other bullshit, like it's a nice weather, and especially if that is your closest friends, like that ain't no true friendship, I would say. It's
Mhm.
because it just feels that if we can create the space that where everyone can be kind of like open and without being judged, like well, of course, well, even brother, we even judge each other in sometimes, but it's just to
Mhm.
keep us in the right track, but not being judged by
Mhm.
some bullshit stuff, and not like still being open to the other people and not judge them. Well, not to judge them because they have some flaws, because we all have fucking flaws and we all make
Mhm.
mistakes. So it's not the reason to not to forgive the person and just actually be with them. And you just, yeah, fuck all the other kind of relationship, because like why would I waste my time like with people who don't never talk about anything, only thing they can just do is just like, even though I want to help all count those kinds of people, but people also kind of
Mhm.
need to have the will to help themselves, but to try to kind of like
Mhm.
tie this all up. But yeah, totally makes sense that that's a good thing that we should aspire to kind of like create this kind of environments.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that's, I think wrap conversation up in a way.
Mm. Well,
Um, that's, yeah. I think why you mentioned that um, it's just like this kind of sincerity. At least what I've been feeling is like, hey, whatever I'm going through here is like, yeah, I'm not like trying to teach anything. I'm not to guide anything. It's just like I'm going through my own healing process, right?
mm,
And again, goes back what you said, like it's just an invitation, right? It's just that I'm not to push any agenda, not to convince anyone. That's my healing process. You're more than welcome, right? You can co-create this, can hold the space together, but that's it. The invitation. I think that's, yeah. I think I'm definitely gonna leave this like with that like in my heart, because I was like, okay, that's the word, right? Sometimes the word really brings this conscience like to the surface, right? That's an invitation. I think I was for a few weeks, I was trying like how I frame this, right? What's that? And that's true. That's an invitation. That's
mm,
what I,
nice,
one of the things definitely going to take from that. That's an
nice.
invitation to the sacred in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah.
As
Well,
deep as it
yeah,
can get.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. And how do you say that getting better at all these kinds of things, how have you seen the effect of that in other things in your life, like work wise, other relationships wise, and all these things like the last few years, to just kind of like also
Mm,
trying to wrap up the whole thing of like
mm,
how all the things have changed and how maybe these have, I would say, almost, or
mm,
I would guess, or at least for me, these have kind of been one of the key factors to actually make all that change. But like, how would you feel that,
mm,
how it affects or other things in life?
mm. I think that the first thing that comes to my heart is that when I deal with other people, right? Or of course, like I always have the ups and downs, but when I deal with other people, I really resonate with what you mentioned. Like you start to have this feeling that people can relax and open up, like
Mm,
in an easier way and faster, right? And I think that's the pattern. I definitely relate to that. It's just it's almost like whatever you're talking after a few minutes, you start like landing this kind of like, hey, that's what I'm feeling, that's what I'm going through.
hmm
And you feel the shift. You feel the shift. That's I think that the main result of all of that.
mm,
It's almost like you shortcut this kind of conversation. It's like, hey, I'm opening my heart right now, right? In a very fair manner, right? I'm not trying to be over like react. I'm not trying to overreact to anything, but just that's the place I'm right now. And you see the person just like as all those layers are like being shattered quite quickly. I think that's the definitely the main thing is just access. Like people start talking like heart to heart way faster. And sometimes it's something that I would never expect, right? Where you just like start clicking, right? Of course, not with everyone. It's completely reasonable with a lot of people. And for me, the one of the most beautiful things is just see the other people start this kind of journey as well. Someone that says like, hey, I have been struggling for the last 10 years and I don't know, last week I went to try to look for some sort of help.
hmm
Or yeah, I just had this conversation with someone. It's just like, yeah, man, like, it's like we're all on this journey, right? All this journey. I heard from a good friend of mine that because I always have been saying that like I always wait to someone to bleed before I could bleed, right?
hmm
In a way, see them vulnerable before I do anything, and that's very, um, I'll say, very toxic in a way, right? Because you always need to
mm
poke to the person until they crack, and then you, oh, okay, you're a human being, and now that's a bit of my flaws, right?
Yeah.
And he told us something along the lines of like, yeah, you don't need to bleed, right? You don't need to bleed
hmm
at all. Not try to see the other person bleed or yourself. You just go there and you just be very, very open, right? And that's it. And it sounds almost silly, but for me, it's a huge thing. I think that's going back to your question, the biggest impact is those two things.
mm Yeah.
Does that make
Well,
sense? But,
yeah. It makes, and I make me think about like the few times I've been there and talking to the people, and just actually last time I was there, I remember, I think Ruth and a few others said gave like really high praises to you, like he's a good guy and he's brings a good energy and good atmosphere. So, and I could definitely say that Danny and all the people can also say the same about you. So thinking about like creating the environment, the atmosphere for that, like we talked just now, I think it seems from what I have seen, you have managed to actually do that there where you live, and that I it feels like it attracts also a lot of people because who wouldn't want to be part of that? Let's say. So yeah, I think it's really beautiful what's happening, and yeah, it's been really, really, really nice to see that it's been this big change. I think that yeah, you have grown into something more, even more than you were, and it just keeps on growing this beautiful tree around you. So
that's definitely beautiful. I really appreciate your words, man. Just like that, that touched me deeply. Honestly, it's gives this kind of endorsement, just like whatever is the path, right? And
mm,
sometimes it's very unknown, but just we just feel in our hearts, right? And again, by the end of the day, is everything's like mirrors, right? You attract like-minded people. That's how we strengthen ourselves. Like that's our roots, right? Literally. And you're like, you're my brother. Like you're one of those people that have been sharing this journey, right? It's a
Mm-mm.
beautiful journey for the last years and getting very close to someone that I have in my heart. And yeah, I just by the end of the day, for me, the easiest way to say that is just I feel at home, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
with you and talking right now, like it just goes back to this kind of sacred moment, forget about time and so on. And it just showed this huge appreciation, like not only by your words, but also like admiration, right? I think that's a thing that's huge, right? I look at you and say like, my God, like this guy changed his whole life and he's producing like things that are just like amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And I'm a huge fan, huge honor for me as Bernardo Padilla say like,
Mm-hmm.
to be here having this conversation with you, sharing those moments and learning and sparring, even jiu-jitsu in life and our heart, right? I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things someone can have, right? You just feeling at home, right? Especially if miles away from where you're coming from, but it doesn't matter if you're in the home country. It's always special to feel at home with someone, and that's how I feel towards you, brother. Just feel at home. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for the invitation, right? I'll take that in my heart. Invitation to be open and honest. That
Yes.
really touched me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I would say the same to you. Always be a good brother of mine. And I said, like I told you, like it's kind of funny that it seems like my best friend is like living in Copenhagen. It's like sometimes it can people
Oh,
just it feels like it's fucking funny or kind of weird. Maybe well, it's not maybe that weird, but yeah, it's like I just to want to maybe share with people who don't know, just to kind of like also from what I started or like yeah, being fucked over in few jobs, being fired, being basically broke, and then taking the risk to actually start something way new. Well, this was one thing that I had already kind of like going on this podcast, which was nice. And of course, I have been already doing jiu-jitsu a lot, which is a good thing, a nice thing. But then basically just started a whole new career. Started to be um, what is it in English? But entrepreneur, like a
mhm.
yksityisyrittäjä, whatever the fuck it's in English. But yeah, and then just like going from that and actually getting a lot of things starting to click, kind of like, of course, and I always will just to give a shout out. I'm not gonna, or I don't know if he's gonna ever gonna hear this or whatever, but shout out to Aaron, who is the guy who gave me the chance to actually start this whole thing. And yeah, he hired me, gave me a new education and all these things. So I will be forever grateful for that. And yeah, it's just all the change that has happened. I think I went like, yeah, I can say that I am good at my job actually. And yeah, then becoming even way better at jiu-jitsu than I was. And actually nowadays
Mhm.
teaching that, giving privates to that and all those things. Still being able to compete, which is good, like having like recovering the knees and all these
Mhm.
things and whatever and all the fucking shit. And then becoming a better photographer also, and people kind of like starting to appreciate that and respect that also. And yeah, doing more of this. And I'm not sure if there's something that I'm missing right now, but yeah, basically made my life look a lot like me in a way. And just by, well, yeah, it needed a lot of hard work. It was a lot of hardship and like fucking times when I was like, why the fuck am I even doing this? And why is it like it was a shit show sometimes, and like, well, like it was crazy and chaotic and all these things. But yeah, and also being a lot alone, sacrificing everything else so I can actually do this, and this, and sometimes thinking about it, does it, why the fuck am I doing this many things and it doesn't make any sense? But now looking at everything, it's just, of course, it makes sense now, but just to see the how much I have developed in all the areas, basically, not by with just only just one. And I sometimes I even think about if it was only just one thing, how good I maybe could get at that. But at the same time, I feel like my personality is kind of this, that I need variations and all these things
Mm-hmm.
and multiple stuff. But it's just feels, even to me, kind of fucking crazy how all of these things went. But just, I don't know. I have to say, it real feels really fucking good. But just like, yeah, I don't know. It's a big change, and I it still even sometimes feel like, wow, how did all this happen? Basically.
That's amazing. Yeah, you should be proud, definitely. The whole time I was just thinking like last time we recorded conversation to now, right?
Mm.
What a
Yeah,
change! Everything, the world changed completely, like in a way. But
yeah,
definitely, your journey has been like amazing, inspirational, right? I told you that many times, just inspirational, just like you change the reference point, right? You change the
yeah,
reference point.
yeah. It is.
Congratulations on that, man. And more to come. More to come.
Yeah,
It's just the
more to
beginning,
come.
right?
Yeah, that is true. That is true. The game is just starting, but like, just like, even though, yeah, even though it
Ah,
feels like it's just like, in maybe some people's eyes it's not nothing yet, but like, fuck, it's
ah, it
it's
is.
uh it's a nice thing, and
It's a
like,
lot.
yeah, definitely still going.
That's it. Thank
Yeah. Well,
you. Thank you, brother.
thank you. It's just been actually something like 3 hours or so.
I have no idea. Yeah. It's a short version of what we did before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
It's
think
it's
I have to go now. But it was
yeah,
great, brother.
it
Great.
was. I truly enjoyed this, and we should definitely do this kind of more since you're there and I'm here. And it's
Yeah.
always good. It's always good. It's nice to see you. It's happy to see all these things, and I appreciate all this conversation and all these things. And just to like remind, like you said, we like, was it your girlfriend or something that was almost like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, no, no way, you're just talking for like fucking 5 hours, 6 hours, or something like that. There must be like fucking each other. Or what are you gay? Like, what the fuck?
Just good conversation, man. Just good conversation. Like we're missing that, right? Missing that. It's the healing process. That's how it goes.
Yeah, it is. But always good to see you, and I'm happy to hear from you. And I'll let you go to your things, but love you, man, and hopefully see you soon.
Love your brother. Love your brother. Always in touch, man. Thanks again for the invitation.
No worries, no
Take care,
worries.
brother.
Take care.